Okay, welcome. Tonight, we're presenting the gender ideology pipeline and how it's flowing from on high, from literally the world organizations into Williamson County. This is a lot of information. This is kind of the Glenn Beck style walkthrough on the chalkboard format, but expect that I'm not going to spend a lot of time delving into every organization because we'd be here for, for multiple hours. So I'm going to hit the high points as quickly as I can and just trace how the ideology flows down into our county and specifically to our classrooms where our students, our children encounter it at all grade levels. So in case you don't know me, my name is Robin Steenman. I'm the chapter chair of Moms for Liberty, Williamson County. I'm a former Air Force pilot. I've been married for 12 years, and I'm the mother of 3 to a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, and an 8-year-old. This is part of our November focus on gender ideology in the 2022-2023 school year for parents. Let's go back. And so we've previously covered critical race theory and social emotional learning. And then November's been quite a lot of events and focus on gender ideology, which has really come to the forefront for our kids in recent months. So what have we done in November? We did book club. We read Irreversible Damage by Abigail Shrier. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's going to help you understand this ideology really better than anything. We put on a Gender 101 and 102, which are recorded and available on our website. The quiz for parents is in draft, so we'll post it when it's ready. And our Gender Ideology Toolkit is live. And at the end of this presentation tonight, I'll give you the assessment of where we believe Williamson County Schools ranks on the topic of gender ideology. And we'll see if you agree. So in all of those events in the month of November, we have heard from a bunch of different perspectives on gender ideology. We've heard from a dad, a really extraordinary dad who travels Canada and America and sharing the message about what gender ideology really is and what it really does to kids. We've heard from an evolutionary biologist, Dr. Colin Wright. We've heard from a philosopher, Dr. Jay Richards. We've heard from a mom whose daughter was transitioned without her consent. And we've heard from Matt Walsh. So that leaves me, if this program would cooperate. So the question for me as the chapter chair for Williamson County is, okay, we've heard from all these experts, but how is it in Williamson County and how pervasive is it? So answering that question feels a lot like this. A lot of hours have gone into this presentation, and you may well find additional information that I didn't find, but this is upwards of 30 to 40 hours of work just trying to find it. And these rabbit holes go deep. So again, that's why I'm going to kind of scratch the surface and give you a pretty good idea of how it's flowing into our county. And this is the pipeline. So at the top of the graphic, can you guys see my mouse moving around? Okay. So here at the top of the graphic in the light blue, those are world organizations. And so you'll see that it really comes from on high. And when you start looking at these various organizations, that's when the rabbit holes get really deep. This one right here should actually be United Nations. And then under that, you have more governmental or institutional organizations, ones that we've come to trust, like the CDC and the DOE, American Academy of Pediatrics, American School Counselor Association, SECUS, all those things that we should trust. And then under that, we have in the beige, these are more the activist organizations. And then at the very bottom in white, those are the organizations that are closest to our schools in Williamson County. They're right here, they're in Franklin, they're in the county, and they are active. And that's where your students encounter it the most. That's the boots on the ground part of the ideology, while the other stuff filters in from the top. And then, of course, at the very bottom, you have Vanderbilt, which has been doing top and bottom surgeries, which are euphemism for double mastectomies and phalloplasties and castrations for profit. So at the end of the day, with all of this stuff, the kids kind of filter down towards an institution like Vanderbilt, where they may or may not be irreversibly damaged. So what I'm not covering tonight is universities and academia. I'm not covering the mainstream media or social media or the entertainment industry, nor am I covering the funding streams for these organizations. Those are all presentations unto themselves. I am just covering how the ideology itself gets to your child in the classroom. But if you would like to learn about these other, the other way that the things flow, then these are two really amazing resources. They're already posted to our website in the Gender Ideology Toolkit. You can watch Glenn Beck. He really focuses on the money and the billions and billions of dollars behind this ideology and who is funding it. And then Advocates Protecting Children. This is a 27-minute video that they put out, and you can see that they have a web. Their web reaches the same conclusion mine does, in that, or ours does, and that the schools are at the epicenter. Wow. And that all of these organizations and
I'm trying to find
ideologies and agendas
Chris
are pushing towards the schools. Theirs just looks a little bit different, and they bring in some extra elements that I chose not to. Very much worth the watch on both of those. So we're going to start at the top, United Nations. If you start digging through the United Nations website, it's there. And it goes on and on and on. So I just got some screenshots of a few things, but it talks about the UN is calling for equal rights and fair treatment for lesbian, gay, bi, trans, and intersex people.
And Chris and Grace.
Somebody's not muted. Okay. They also, I thought this was interesting, they have appointed an independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity. And the current office holder of that, the current mandate holder, is this guy, Victor Madrigal, whatever. But you can see that in their website, they have all the buzzwords. When you start seeing gender identity, spectrum, intersex, there's not male and female, non-binary, that it's just, it's absolutely ideological and not based in science. So the UN is absolutely compromised in this. So you'll see in a lot of the UN, if I back up one, see here at the top, United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, which that doesn't sound high and mighty, but let's take a look at that. The Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. These are some of the things that they do. It's a partial screenshot, but I thought it was interesting. They privately influence governments. They do public advocacy. They do this UN Free and Equal campaign, which I'll get into. They also work with the private sector and special procedures and confidential communications with government. So with the government stuff, it's all very shady and secretive behind the scenes. And then you have them also working in the private sector. And then you also have this Free and Equal campaign. So the Office of the High Commissioner is like an all angle assault on the issue. Everywhere that they can exert pressure and influence, they do. If you also, one of the biggest pressure points that the UN and this office utilizes is on businesses. And you see that, I mean, everybody wonders why, you go woke, go broke. So why is everybody going woke? Well, this is a contributing factor. So here you have the standards of conduct for business. This is the current High Commissioner. And And then here's their Free and Equal campaign. So Free and Equal, United Nations for LGBT Equality. And again, it's just a worldwide launch against homophobia and transphobia. And, you know, I think a lot of us have experienced when somebody calls you a transphobe and you're kind of like, where did that come from? I'm just speaking in fact and science. I think the UN appears to be doing the same thing. And here they have, the UN has weighed in on what makes family. And it's not necessarily a mom and dad. Here again, they're weighing in on global business standards and then participating in all the trans days of visibility and whatnot. And here's just a few more of the graphics and publications that they have. Now, this Free and Equal campaign is a very, very big website. It goes really deep. And then as you can see here, it's sexual orientation, gender identity throughout history. Okay. UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization, is also involved in this. And we know from our previous studies in October that UNESCO is heavily involved in pushing social emotional learning. So of course, they're involved in this as well. And then moving on to another world organization is the WHO. Now, this gender inclusive biology will come back up. That is 100% how it's getting taught to our kids. They are literally rewriting biology in order to make it, to present it as fact to our children. And then you can see on their website, they're talking about harmful gender norms, rigid notions of masculinity, diverse gender identities. And again, we've heard from a scientist. There are male and female. It has to do with science and gametes and chromosomes. So the World Health Organization, of all organizations in the world, is completely disconnected from scientific data. And here it's talking about its widely used gender mainstreaming manual. Which brings us to the World Economic Forum. So we know that the World Economic Forum is heavily involved in the Great Reset, right? So here it is, it's talking about gender ideology with the clear social and business implications. Of course it is. And there's lots and lots of publications and articles that they have written about the ideology and why businesses should be a part of it. So this is a partnership that they announced. And if you can look on just some of the partners, Accenture, Best Buy, Cisco, Coca-Cola, Deutsche Bank, GLAD, will come to them, Human Rights Campaign, Human Rights Watch, Pepsi, Procter & Gamble, MasterCard, Johnson & Johnson, Microsoft. These are all corporations that you know, and whether you like it or not, you probably patron these businesses, but they are 100% in this cabal to push gender ideology along with the World Economic Forum. So when you dig a little deeper into the World Economic Forum's website, you come across this, and I know it's going to be hard to read. You'll just trust me on some of it, but here at the top, it talks about strategic intelligence and then the big picture, and it has transformation maps. And there's a transformation map for diversity and inclusion, for LGBTI, and for social justice. And when you pull up these maps, LGBT is probably the simplest ones. The other two are nearly double the spokes on this ring, but it's talking about utilizing all these different societal parameters to transform society. And that right there is really sums up the World Economic Forum's interest in gender ideology, because it can be used along with these others to transform the society that they want. So when the World Economic Forum pressures businesses like Coca-Cola and Pepsi to push gender ideology, it's not really because they care about the poor, confused kid in the middle school classroom. They could care less. Their agenda is here. It's a transformation map. And those kids caught in the middle, they'll get bulldozed, steamrolled right over, and they really couldn't care less. And we all know that, but let's just understand what the World Economic Forum is, the one world organization that really put it out there as to what their true goal is. And there it is right there, the Center for the New Economy and Society, the Great Reset. So WPATH, the World Professional Organization of Transgender Health, they have been for many years. They recently rewrote their standards of care. This is version 8. It was released, I believe, in November. And it's a long document about basically how you handle gender dysphoric youth and how you operate on them. So here you go in chapter 6, adolescents, chapter 7 is children. And then you've got hormone therapy, surgery, and postoperative care. It even has eunuchs and intersex in there. So the WPATH then feeds Asia Path, US Path, European Path, and that is how the standards of care are filtered down to all of those children's hospitals that are carving up kids. So we have covered most of the world organization. So now I'm going to go through these kind of national governmental organizations. All right. Hope everybody can't hear my kids in the background. It's always chaos. All right, the White House. The White House only gets one slide because it's obvious that the White House is enamored with this ideology and is going to do whatever these world organizations bid it to do. And so they're absolutely on board with the gender ideology train. There's been multiple executive orders, memorandums. Yep. That filters straight to the U.S. Department of Education. So back in Obama's term, and this is really the start of the DOE and gender ideology becoming very much in lockstep, was at this point when Obama appointed the Safe Schools czar, Kevin Jennings. And he is responsible for the very first gay-straight alliance, that's what it was called at that time, as a teacher. Then he went on to found GLSEN, which we'll come to. He wrote the foreword for a book called Queering Elementary Education. He's a self-identified activist. He did not hide that at all. He's been supported by the NEA, Planned Parenthood, and others. And you can find out down here that there's just multiple issues. He even turned the other way for a child that was raped by a pedophile. So he's always been very upfront about his radical views. And even Fistgate, right, where he did a GLSEN conference and it handed out kits to kids and instructed them on fisting. The GLSEN was obviously thrilled that Kevin Jennings was nominated to the DOE. And you can see here their list of other ties with the NEA, social workers, American Federation of Teachers, National Association of School Psychologists. You're going to see that come up again and again. So now we have Miguel Cardona, and he's here on an op-ed. The nation's head of education wants queer youth to know he's in their corner. He is absolutely in their corner, but he's not. It's actually a misnomer. He's not in the youth's corner. He's in the ideology's corner, because this ideology steamrolls our youth. And if you look at the DOE resources page, you've got supporting intersex students, confronting anti-LGBTQI harassment in schools, standing with LGBTQ students, et cetera, et cetera. So also, the time is now to affirm in every way we can, including through the support of our LGBTQ plus students, our nation's highest ideals. So again, I don't believe that word was a mistake. Affirm, gender affirming care is the big buzzword right now. Some more publications that have been put out by the DOE in conjunction with the White House. So the White House Toolkit on transgender equality, and the DOE policies, emerging practices for supporting transgender students. I'm so glad that they're focused on this while our student scores are in the tank. That brings us to the CDC. So why would the CDC even get involved? But the CDC is apparently allocated $85 million for grants requiring schools to start student-led groups. Again, it's right there in the headline for the school to start a student-led groups. When we get down into these quote student-led groups, they're absolutely not student-founded and led. They are funded and pushed on a national level, and they have a lot of support and machinery behind them. So if you go to the CDC website, it talks about the Gay Straight Alliance and the Gender and Sexuality Alliance. So CDC is 100% pushing this down, as we know. So when you take a look at their website, and it talks about what, significance for schools, parents, and healthcare providers, we all have a role in supporting transgender youth. Here's the school's role. You can take steps to affirm the identity. You can provide or refer to students to comprehensive affirming sexual health services. That has actually happened in more of the blue states. They will send your child off campus for gender transition without you even knowing. But then look at what parents can do. There's only one bullet for what a parent can do, and that's to seek out resources so that you can understand, accept, and get on board. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics, you start looking through their website, it's very easy to find the woke language, gender diverse youth, opportunities to identify and address systemic inequities. Right, that's far beyond the guidance of, hey, don't put your kid in this contraption, or how to keep your baby safe when you start talking about gender diverse youth and systemic inequities. Now here, of all places, this American Academy of Pediatrics talks about sex assigned at birth ratio among transgender and gender diverse adolescents in the United States. Okay, take that on. That is woke language, but let's take it on. And then in their conclusions, it says that it basically dismisses that you're a boy or a girl at birth, and says you should not use that to argue against the provision of gender affirming medical care for adolescents. That's unbelievable. Here it talks about the geographic distribution of clinical care for transgender and gender diverse youth. I want you to take a look at this right here. We aggregated data from the Human Rights Campaign for pediatric clinical care programs. So that's going to come up again. And then basically down here in the conclusions, it's basically slams the South and the Midwest for not being woke enough and for providing enough transgender care. I don't know if they've checked Vanderbilt out recently, but that was their conclusion. Which brings us to the American Psychological Association. And you would think that the Psychological Association would acknowledge that many of these gender dysphoric children, and I put that in quotes, just many of them are not truly gender dysphoric, might have underlying psychological factors. Many of them have been through trauma. They've been traumatized by a family member. They've been abused. They've experienced the loss of a family member. There was one example of a girl whose mother was killed by her boyfriend. So this girl identified femininity as with weakness and said that, well, if she were a boy, then, she could have fought off the boyfriend, or if her mother was a boy, she wouldn't have been killed. And this is why she suddenly wanted to identify as a boy. And what do? They transition her. Nobody stops to look at the underlying causal factors, which you think that the American Psychological Association would advocate for. Instead, they're publishing books on basically punishing their non-accepting parents. Again, all of these organizations, from the CDC to the NEA to the APA, you see this common thread where they're against the non-accepting parents. Parents are the enemy. And then you have social media influencers telling your kids to walk away from your parents because they'll be your glitter family and your parents will never understand. They're just a gatekeeper that's withholding hormones and surgery from you. So this is all pervasive. So the American Psychological Association, they have a book on he, she, and they, and guidance here on not using gendered language with your clients. And again, it's talking about supporting youth without requesting disclosure and confidentiality parameters. And when you start reading into these paragraphs, it's basically setting the stage for don't tell the parents and giving that guidance to your counselors. So GLAD, this is very quick touch on here, but the World Economic Forum leans on GLAD quite a bit. And GLAD is responsible or focused on the media side, be it in media itself or basically the entertainment industry. And it has a whole report about accelerating acceptance. They put it out, I believe, every year. And if you see here with new challenges facing the community, specifically attacks against trans youth, cultural institutions like TV take on the crucial role of changing hearts and minds. What we see and hear in the media impacts decisions we make in schools, offices, courtrooms, and the ballot box. That's a lot of agenda right there, political agenda. It was founded 35 years ago to work with studios, social media advertisers, corporate and global leaders to help them create opportunities for inclusion and representation. So it's no wonder that GLAD and the World Economic Forum are very much tied together. And they every year publish the Where We Are on TV report, and literally they go down and they count the number of LGBTQ characters every year and whether it's gone up or down, and gives, this year there are 42 transgender regular and recurring characters across all broadcast, cable, and streaming. They're made up of 20 trans women, 14 trans men, and 8 trans characters who are non-binary. So none of this is by mistake. This is all very deliberate, very planned, agenda driven. And the fact that you can't turn on the TV and not be bombarded with this ideology is not a coincidence. It's 100% deliberate and planned and funded. Now I would like to hand it over to Alvin Louie, president of Courage is a Habit. He is a political refugee from California. He moved his family to the Midwest only to find the same ideologies that ruined his old home are now spreading across the country. Does that sound familiar? We have so many stories like that in Williamson County. Courage is a Habit is an organization that creates actionable education strategies for the average parent, school board candidate, and legislator to take action in defending children from indoctrination in K-12 schools. And if you've seen the recent Epoch Times article, Courage is a Habit did an amazing job of exposing the American School Counselors Association and just the absolute far left radical ideology that they're pushing on your children in the name of school counseling. So I'm going to let him take it over.
Hello there. Everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Thank you for having me, Robin. Always a pleasure to see you. You do such a wonderful job. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes as a high-level overview to what ASCA is, and then I'll point you to some resources on our site that can dive into a lot more detail. So the American School Counselor Association, it's a pretty old organization, and it has a chapter in all 50 states. It provides training, missions, objectives, conferences for school counselors across K-12 across the country. But around 2014 is when they really started to transform to be a really radical organization. So now they consider themselves agents of social change, just like all the other organizations that Robin did such a great job of covering. What's dangerous about ASCA, about the school counselors, are really 3 things. Number one, most parents still believe that they're these nice guidance counselors. So out of all the organizations, so you talk about teachers, we can talk about school board members, librarians, very few people talk about the school counselors, because they largely believe that they're still guidance counselors, and that's not the case. So what we did was we went to their conference in July and pulled a bunch of videos and PowerPoints and handouts and all sorts of things, and we still have barely went through even half of what we got from them. And so in order for us to expose them for who they were or who they are, we created a campaign called Behind Closed Doors. And Robin, if you just go back one more quick slide there, this is the cover to the first one, Behind Closed Doors. And so what we did was we just showed just how radical they are between 1998 and 2002. And in 1998, their mission statement was pretty much exactly what you imagine it to be. Counselors should not influence the values or lifestyles and decisions on the students. That's perfect. That's exactly what you expect. Here in 2022, it's saying social justice, fighting systemic oppression. That's part of the model that is equitable outcomes for students and all that. You know, same word salad that you're used to hearing from everywhere. But the difference between 2022 and 1998 is so vast. Unfortunately, most parents still believe that they behave under the 1998 rules, and that's not the case. So Robin, you can go ahead and go forward. Thank you. And so, you know, this is the same thing, how it started, how it's going. It's the same line there. I'm gonna direct your attention to the right-hand side just to give you a brief overview. This is just a fraction, okay, of their agenda for their annual conference in July that we went to. It was a private conference, so they were able to, you know, train and speak very freely, which is why if you go and download Behind Closed Doors Part 1 and 2, you will find a lot of the videos and materials that we got from them. And just to give you an idea, okay, and this is a 2.5-day conference. It went all day long. This is just a fraction of their agenda. Anti-racism starts with us. Become an LGBT inclusive school. Equity in action. Teach grad students trauma-informed practices. Support transgender and gender-expansive students, and so on and so forth. The entire conference was like this. The entire conference was like this. And so the first dangerous thing is that the parents still believe that they're just the guidance counselors, and we want to show that's not the case. The second dangerous thing is, while woke teachers will influence a culture of a classroom, which is why we fight so hard, you know, because they spend all day with our kids, school counselors impact the culture of an entire school. They're the ones that are in the back room, in the break room, during meetings, wagging their finger about misgendering and pronouns, and they're the ones pushing those things the hardest as a school culture. And so this is why it's so important that we wanted to expose the school counselors, because that's where the school culture, and they're the biggest pushers of the transgender cult. Pronoun changes hidden from parents, transition closets hidden from parents, transgender topics to be introduced in elementary school, sexually explicit books for representation. That's all coming from these counselors. That's where they're being trained on, and that's what they're affecting the school culture with. And so the third thing that makes them, you know, very dangerous is that they play with this public-private scam, meaning that if there was a training being done at your school for teachers or anybody in the personnel, you can FOIA that. It's public information. The problem with the American School Counselors Association is that it is a private nonprofit. Okay, it's a private company. So school counselors go to these trainings, go to these conferences, get their missions and objectives, and then come back and infect your students with the training. But if you went, for example, to your school and said, hey, I heard that there was an American School Counselors Association. I understand that some of our counselors went to that in July. May I see the agenda? May I see the PowerPoints? Can I see the videos of their sessions? Your school will say, that's got nothing to do with us. This is nothing to do with, it's not part of the DOE, it's not part of our school districts. So if we didn't expose something like this, nobody would have known this is what the counselors are being put through. So those are the three kind of dangerous things at a high level of ASCA. And so what we did was, if you go to courageisahabit.org and go under exposing school counselors section, there's going to be, Behind Closed Doors 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you download any one of those, at the end of any of the PDFs, any of the parts 1, 2, or 3, we have an opt-out form for you that you can download and you can fill in and tell the school and school counselors, any of the mental health professionals, to say, I don't want my child informally or formally to be to have any interaction with the school counselors or social workers. And the reason why we really push so hard for you to, and whether they respect it or not, you at least turn it in, so that way you have a legal record there that you requested that, and then you can, lawsuits and different things like that can happen in the future. I will close with this one thing that I want everybody to be very, very cognizant of. In this space, we often have to fight in the rears. And what I mean by that is that we're always 5 to 7 years too late. That's why this is so difficult. If we're lucky, we're 5 to 7 years too late. Depending on the state, you might be 10 years too late. And so the way I describe it is that the cement is already set. Not only is the cement set, it's already been baked by a few summers, 5 to 7 summers. So this is why when we're trying to fight this, it feels like you're trying to take a jackhammer to cement, and it's so difficult. So one of the things encourages a habit we want parents to also think about while they're trying to fight, jackhammer this cement, is to also pay attention to what hasn't set yet. Because you have a better chance of fighting when the cement is still being rolled, right? So one of the things that hasn't set yet, but it's already here, is, and Robin touched upon that, separation from children, the parents. And the way they're doing that is they're redefining 2 words, okay? And I want you to remember that if you redefine words, you don't need to change the law. And the 2 words that they're redefining is safety and abuse, safe and abuse. So they will tell you that these mental health initiatives are to keep children safe. Pronouns to keep children safe. That's why they always use the word safe, safe, safe. Abuse, abuse. What they mean is if you as a parent do not succumb to the transgender delusion for your children, you are unsafe and your home is abusive and the school is a safe place. So every time they use these words that you as wonderful parents assume that you do the same thing. You want to keep your child safe. You don't want children to be abused. You don't want children to feel bullied. They use the words, but not your meaning. Okay, they use your word and not your meaning. And it's what we call language contamination. They use words that they know good parents won't object to. You just don't know they're not having the same meaning. So safe and abuse are the 2 words that they're going to redefine. Don't let them do it. Don't start your kids on pronouns. Don't be okay with that. Because the moment you're okay with pronouns and they're going to keep it from you, then they will be able to use that same argument for puberty blockers, binders, tucking, eventually surgery. If they can say, we got to keep the secret from you, mom and dad, because your child wants to be known by this pronoun and you're unsafe, so we got to keep them safe, they literally can use that exact same argument all the way through surgery. And so thank you, Robin, for letting me talk a little bit about ASCA. Visit courageishabit.org and we have more details with it. Thank you, Robin. You guys are doing such an amazing job down there.
Thanks, Alvin. Appreciate you jumping on tonight and telling us about your work.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to SECUS. That started over 55 years ago. It was initially the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States. And they put out guidelines for comprehensive sex ed for K through 12. Yes, kindergarten, for some reason, needs comprehensive sex education. Again, we are going to cover CSE in depth in February. So we're going to come back to SECUS, but realize that they absolutely play a role in pushing of the gender ideology. And if you look here at their own press release, at SECUS, we believe that sex ed can spark the social change we need in response to a variety of pressing issues. They rebranded themselves from the long title that I just told you to SECUS, Sex Ed for Social Change. And so it's not sex ed to teach your kids what they need to know about the birds and the bees. It is to affect social change, which sounds an awful lot like the World Economic Forum. So this is their new logo, Sex Ed for Social Change. And looking around their website, look, here's a funders briefing on narrative shift, sex education as culture change, policy success. But I'm not permitted to read it. There's no excerpt because this is a protected post. So whatever it is, they don't want it out. They also have some helpful articles on, did everybody know that May was the month of masturbation, to celebrate Masturbation May? Did not know that. But it has a whole entry about that. I don't want these people anywhere near my kids. And then they have, reams upon reams of materials, but here's their positions on sexually explicit materials. SECUS believes that sexually explicit visual, printed, or online materials can be valuable educational personal aids when used sensitively in a manner appropriate to the viewer's age and developmental level. Well, we know that they've thrown that out the window. But basically, they're like, yeah, we love sexually explicit materials. And that is reflected in our classroom libraries and in our school libraries. There is sexually explicit, arguably pornographic material there. And it's not normal, man on woman type encounters. They're almost always homosexual or transsexual. And they are very dark in nature. And I'm talking about rape, incest, gang rape. There's a book that was in Williamson County schools. I think they just removed it, and it's the repeated rape of a 7-year-old girl by her father. So I'm going to say no to sexually explicit materials. And it also has a position on masturbation. And from SECUS itself, sex ed is for reproductive justice and social change. This is not just basic education. So that brings us to the teachers union. Back a few years back, they wrote Schools in Transition, a guide for supporting transgender students in K through 12. And it was really pretty egregious back then. Now we're all desensitized to it, that the NEA would partner with Gender Spectrum, the ACLU, the Human Rights Campaign, which is not a human rights campaign, we'll get to them, and the National Center for Lesbian Rights to put this, ideological guidance out for schools, K through 12 schools. And then additionally, GLSEN is where Safe Schools came from. And so Safe Schools was a huge open door for a lot of this ideology to come in, because it was like, oh, well, we're going to hold these programs or these school talks that teach students about bullying and how to stop bullying. But really, they just use that as an open door to talk about gender identity and ideology. So, but if you go look for Safe Schools now, they've changed the name. So if you also on the NEA website, right there, they advocate for PFLAG, which we'll get to, and it has a link to the Vanderbilt Children's Transgender Clinic. So coming back to our diagram here, we've done all of the blue, and we're going to go through this middle part here. So we've done kind of the official organizations, the world organizations, the national organizations, the national lobbies, the ones that have a lot of firepower and supposedly authority behind their names. And these are the activist organizations. So we're going to start with the Human Rights Campaign. So right off the bat, gender affirming care. Get the facts on gender affirming care. They have a guide to neo-pronouns, like kill me. There's so many pronouns out there. And then they have, their comment on the real threat to women's sports is not transgender athletes. So you can expect that the left is fighting that battle. They really are, I believe, losing that PR campaign. So you're going to see a lot of pro-transgender athletes, the Let Them Play campaign that's going to kick into extremely high gear in the coming months and years. So Human Rights Campaign, what can you thank them for? Well, they created a while back, I think is in 20 years, no, 10 to 20 years. I can't remember the exact origination year, but they created the Corporate Equality Index, the CEI, and they had amazing success with that. And so by rating corporations and giving, certain corporations a bad rating because they're not woke enough, but then rating Coca-Cola way up here, then for some reason, these corporations really want a great CEI index. And so the HRC is the one that rates them all, and they put out an annual report. And if any company does any kind of an infraction, then they get, point deductions. So who made the human rights campaign, the end all be all for rating corporations? I don't know, but that's where they started it. Then they moved on to this one, Municipal Equality Index. So they're like, great, well, we can rate all the corporations. Now we're going to rate the cities and municipalities as to how woke they are. And then down here, you can download the 2023 Corporate Equality Index Toolkit in case you need to work on your rating for this coming year. So they moved on. They had great success with that, with pressuring corporations to get in line and stay in line. So they moved on to the Healthcare Equality Index. And that is really how we've got these children's hospitals that are supposed to be for the children, carving them up and mutilating them for profit. And it's the HEI now, the Healthcare Equality Index. And I believe it started in 2018. And that was so Johns Hopkins, I don't have the name of the doctor at the tip of my head, but Johns Hopkins child, transgender clinic was actually pretty rational in their approach to treating gender dysphoric kids. They did the watch and wait, and let's make sure that this is really the right answer before we permanently disfigure a child. That guy, they received a downgrade for their HEI index because of him. So what does Johns Hopkins do? They fire him. He was the head of the Johns Hopkins the pediatric transgender clinic. And so then they brought in the woke people, their HEI went up. Why Johns Hopkins cares, I don't know. But you can see here in their news headlines, they honor 19 Pennsylvania healthcare facilities for basically carving up children. 19 in Ohio, 6 in Michigan, 9 in Wisconsin. And that list just goes on and on and on. And you can see here in a graphical depiction how many are in each state. So then on the reverse side, they will give point deductions. So recently, this year, they put out these press releases for why UT Southwestern and Children's Health received a 25-point deduction in HEI for 2022. Same with Mercy San Juan Medical Center. Okay, well, why? Basically, it says that this major penalty applied to their HEI scores because they are denying necessary and medically approved care to transgender youth while continuing the same care for cisgender youth, which doesn't make any sense because I don't think they're carving up cisgender youth. But look down here. So we're getting the throwback. So if I made that graphic, if I made all those entities connect in every way, there'd be so many lines on that graphic that you wouldn't want to look at it. It would be a spaghetti mess and it would be useless. So for that graphic, I did not connect many of the organizations, but realize almost all of them are connected. And then you see it here, the Human Rights Campaign pulls from the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the American Psychological Association, which we already covered. And then the American Academy of Pediatrics pulled from the Human Rights Campaign for their geographic study. So they're all very much in bed together. And the Human Rights Campaign is here leaning on those entities to say that sexual orientation and gender identity are real concepts recognized by major medical and mental health associations. And that's why Mercy San Juan and Southwestern is so evil. So also, in note of the write-ups, it says Mercy San Juan Medical Center is a Catholic hospital, and as such follows Catholic ethical and religious directives, which does not allow for the direct sterilization of either men or women. That is a higher edict for the hospital, but Human Rights Campaign is going to downgrade them anyway. So by exerting this pressure through these indexes, then you have entities like Johns Hopkins, Boston Children, the Vanderbilt Clinic that are just carving up children left and right. I mean, so many of them have been exposed. They'll take children as young as 12, and it's insane and it's criminal. Also, as if that weren't enough, then the Human Rights Campaign feels the need to tell you to weigh in on the Bible, which I thought was interesting. And they have a whole toolkit for church leaders. So there's a spinoff from the Human Rights Campaign, and that is welcoming schools, creating safe and welcoming schools. And that just sounds so nice. Like all of their little buzzwords just sound so nice, but it is a Trojan horse, and you can sign up for the Welcoming Schools newsletter for continuing education, and your school system can also strive to be certified as a welcoming school. So it is the most comprehensive bias-based bullying prevention program in the nation to provide LGBTQ and gender inclusive professional development, training, lesson plans, book lists, resources, so specifically designed for educators and youth serving professionals. They use intersectional anti-racist lens dedicated to actionable policies and practices. So it does not get any more woke than this. And I thought this was interesting. Why say gay? They have lessons and resources for kindergarten through the 3rd grade, because they're ready to learn about gender ideology. They also have book lists, and here at the top of one of them is All Boys Aren't Blue. If you are not familiar with the library books, the supposed banned books list, just wait until March when we focus on the library book issue, and you will learn all about All Boys Aren't Blue. We posted actually on social media, but it is pornographic, and it has a very detailed scene in which one boy sodomizes another boy. And here we are, Welcoming Schools has it at the top of their book list. And of course, I Am Jazz for the kindergartners. But this book, I Am Jazz, does in no way cover the current struggles of Jazz as a transgender girl. It's tragic. It's tragic. She's been through so many surgeries, botched surgeries. It's not working out well, but they'll just paint this rosy picture to kindergartners, and then the little kids are off to the races. Which brings us to Vanderbilt, of which we are all fairly well familiar on this, but for the record, Matt Walsh blew the lid on Vanderbilt doing double mastectomies, castrations, and various other operations on children, on minors, for profit. And in the videos that he posted, it shows the hospital administrator saying, if you have a problem with this, if you have a problem of conscience with this, get on board or you're fired. So, and that's how you make doctors go along with this. He held the rally to end child mutilation just last month, but these are screenshots from Vanderbilt. And if you look at their helpful links, there's PFLAG. So like I said, all of these organizations are just so interconnected, and there's WPATH. So Vanderbilt, like most children's hospitals, absolutely uses those standards of care from WPATH. So Planned Parenthood, we're going to briefly touch on Planned Parenthood. There is an international arm of Planned Parenthood, the IPPF, the Federation. And then here in Tennessee, transgender hormone therapy is available in Nashville. So Planned Parenthood has made quite a business model out of killing babies in the womb. But what if you can sterilize the womb before they ever get to that point? And that's quite a money-making venture for them too. So they're handing out hormone therapies to minors, oftentimes no questions asked. So you've got the legal arms of this ideology, and a big one is the Southern Poverty Law Center. So they have criminalized conversion therapy. Conversion therapy, everybody, they want you to think, right, of back in the 50s when you put someone in an institution and they did various questionable practices to try and reverse somebody's sexuality. And of course, we know that that's not appropriate or right or ethical. But now they have expanded the definition of conversion therapy to in some cases be, you can't pray for your child because that's considered conversion therapy. And if, let's go back to that example that I gave of the child whose mother was killed by her boyfriend. And suddenly this child says, I'm gender dysphoric and I want to transition. The caregiver, the guardian of that kid, cannot take the child to a psychologist to treat the underlying problems because that psychologist is scared to death of being accused of conversion therapy. So you have all these psychologists and psychiatrists, they're just getting on board because conversion therapy has become such a specter looming on the horizon for them that they're afraid of being ousted and losing their license or even being prosecuted. And Southern Poverty Law Center is right there waiting to sue somebody, which brings us to the ACLU. So many states, as we know, and Tennessee is now one of them, are looking to or have already passed legislation that bans the gender affirming care, the child mutilation of minors. The ACLU is just waiting in the wings to pounce on any legislation that you pass. That's their whole job. So right now, if you go to their website, front and center, it's this Brandt versus Rutledge gender affirming care on trial. And they're trying to take that Arkansas law to town, which is why it is so important that in Tennessee, this law that's on the books, I don't know if you've seen it, it's in our gender ideology toolkit at the very bottom. It's Senate Bill 1, House Bill 1. And it's Tennessee's answer to the Vanderbilt Child Mutilation Center. But they've got to get it right. They cannot add this to the heap of trash bills that don't do anything, like the CRT law or the library law. Because the ACLU is just waiting for us to get it wrong. And then our law is useless. So that's where the ACLU comes into play on all of this, just basically goes after the states. And then you can see here that it's tackling also the coordinated attack on trans student athletes. And you can take the pledge to support trans youth now. So where are we? We're getting there. I thought we'd be done in an hour. It's a lot of information. The pipeline flowing to our schools is just from every direction, and it's so strong that it just takes a while to cover to go through this. So please hang with me. That leads us to GLSEN. GLSEN is one of it's like up there with Human Rights Campaign. It is one of the most well-funded, all-encompassing, all-pervasive organizations, activist organizations out there. And they lobby hard in forming the federal agenda for LGBTQI plus data inclusion. That's really creepy. It's data mining for LGBTQI. Here it talks about activating supportive educators. So basically talking about activist teachers. They're pretty thrilled with Dr. Miguel Cardona as our DOE secretary. And of course, they push the queer books. Apparently they save lives. So GLSEN, as you can imagine, with the size of the organization, the size of the website is also quite large. But I took some time to kind of filter through it, and there's a lot of educational resources and toolkits for teachers. And this is just one of them that I thought was really interesting, is a partnership between GLSEN and Lego, one brick at a time, building inclusive classrooms. So I'm like, well, what is that? Let's look at that. And you download the resource guide. Well, it's just for kindergarten age kids to build an identity tower. And it gives you the rainbow colored Lego bricks. And it has it says for elementary school, it has an elementary school teacher walk through this script and has the learning outcomes, the activities set up. And then under the instructions, give a Lego 6-brick set to each student. Explain that we all have an identity. Our identities are what makes us who we are and special and celebrated. Write out the parts of identity that will be included in this activity on the whiteboard or chalkboard. And that includes name, gender, race, culture, and ask students to assign parts of their identity to the Lego bricks they feel each color represents. Inform students that they can build their tower any way they want. And I emphasize this because my kids love Legos. We have so many boxes of Legos because it's a great building exercise for the mind and for the fingers, especially for little kids. Lego is a great toy, and it has been for many, 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 many years. So if I was told that the kids are doing a Lego exercise in kindergarten or first grade, I as a parent would be thrilled. Great, they're going to love it. But this is how sneaky it is, how you can take multicolored Lego bricks and turn it into a lesson on gender identity. and parents are never going to know about it. Moving on with GLSEN, they feed directly to GSA. So it used to be the Gay Straight Alliance. They've rebranded it to the Gender Sexuality Alliance without changing the logo or anything. And here it talks about starting your GSA, writing a mission statement, how to find a club advisor. And then also I thought it was interesting, there's a number of these sites, GLSEN included, leave this site safely. So when you're on the GLSEN site, you can hit escape 3 times and it'll just take you to a blank Google page, presumably in case your parents walk in. And then it also reminds you here at the bottom to browse this site safely, being that parents are unsafe. Be sure to regularly clear your browser history so that your parents don't know what you've been browsing. Every single one of these organizations is hostile to parents. So for GLSEN in Tennessee, is it here? Yes, it's here. There's some of their social media posts. Which leads us to the GSA network. Now we're getting closer and closer and closer to the county level with our schools. But the Gender Sexuality Alliance is 100% boots on the ground, nationally networked, nationally funded, driven from the top organization. And they will tell you that a GSA is a student-led club, students supporting students in the safe environment to foster friendships and whatever. Student-led clubs generally don't have assets of $2.5 million. And based in Oakland, California. Here it talks about the virtual GSA summit. And then thinking about, I thought this was interesting, again, villainizing parents, thinking about online safety to youth in unsupportive homes. Identify the safe and brave spaces in your home, consider your in-home allies, bridge gaps with social media and headphones, create intentional time alone. Now, I'll take a brief aside here that if you read Irreversible Damage by Abigail Schreier, it talks about many of these students who are suddenly experiencing rapid onset gender dysphoria. Immediately prior to that, they spend an absolutely inordinate amount of time by themselves in social media, TikTok, Tumblr, Instagram, all of them. And here, what is the GSA network telling you to do? Basically, to put your headphones on and then soak your retinas in social media. It's the worst thing for a kid. The kids need to get out and network and get in the real world. And I firmly believe that our kids are isolated and alone. And that's why, one of the reasons is contributing to the suicide rates going up. Again, GSA, student-led, right? They're student-led. Of course, it's, they started by, a 9th grader. I don't know that the student-led, the students wrote a 9-point platform. And I'm going to zoom in on it and summarize it here because the other one's pretty hard to read. But a student-led club took their inspiration from the Black Panther 10-point program, the Young Lords 12-point program, and the Third World Gay Revolution. And this platform, number 1, self-determination and control of our destinies. Well, that's a lie. Nobody controls their destiny. 2, abolition of police, ICE, borders, and judicial system. What does that have to do with gender and sexuality? 3, transformative justice, collective well-being. We'll get into that, transformative and restorative justice in January. And the patriarchy. Most students have no idea what a patriarchy is. I would love to just do like the sidewalk interviewing of high school students. Tell me what a patriarchy is. Decolonization and reparations, free, non-compulsory critical theory education, and global white supremacy, reclamation of stolen lands, invitation to, quote, comrades, accomplices, and allies to join the revolution and achieve liberation. I'm sorry, that doesn't sound student-led. Also, they have the Queer Youth Leading the South action camps. And this is where they focus on, just like the American Academy of Pediatrics said that the South and the Midwest are the least providers of gender-affirming care. Well, the GSA network has an answer for that. They have these camps. And the 5 original sponsor states are Arkansas, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. And well, what do we learn at camp? Racial justice and white supremacy, gender justice and the patriarchy, economic justice and capitalism. And then down here, trans and queer youth united for racial and gender justice. Again, go back to the World Economic Forum. Is this about the well-being of children? No, it's about social change. They want to burn it down and rebuild it in a Marxist New World Order. And that'll be covered in April, Marxism 101. So you have the GSA network, that's the national organization, and then it's filtering down into high schools. This is an example of a high school GSA. It's right here in Nashville. It's the University School of Nashville, and it made the news for having links to Vanderbilt at the time that Vanderbilt was exposed for its corrupt practices. So when you look at their external resources, you just have the who's who list: PFLAG, GLSEN, Human Rights Campaign, Trevor Project, CDC, Johns Hopkins, and Vanderbilt. And not only that, but you have the Vanderbilt buddy program listed on here. And Matt Walsh had something to say about that, the Trans Buddy program. In case the objectors hadn't gotten the memo, Vanderbilt unveiled a program called Trans Buddies. The buddies are trans activists from the community who attend appointments with trans patients, monitoring the doctors to guard against unsafe behaviors such as misgendering. So I'd hate to be a doctor right now. So bringing us ever closer to home, Prism clubs, that has made the news in Williamson County. Has caused a lot of kerfuffle amongst parents because a Prism club has sprung up at Grassland Middle School, supposedly instigated by a 6th grader. But when you look around for Prism clubs, it's not as prevalent as GSAs and GLSEN. They seem relatively newer, but here, just doing a search for it on the internet is popping up in all these middle schools: Glencrest Middle School, Canyon Park Middle School, and then here we have Grassland Middle School. And here it is finally on their website after parents made a big stink about the fact that the club was not announced until after the club day, the open house that occurred in September. After that point, they put up the flyer for the Grassland Prism Club with polyamory flags on it, and then finally posted it to their website. So for anybody who's new to this, right here is the flyer that was posted, and a parent started looking, what are all these flags? One of them is polyamory, which is multiple sexual partners for 6th to 8th graders. We've done a FOIA request for information about how this club got started. And in August, the math teacher, Mr. Zakari, said he was approached by 4 6th graders asking if he would sponsor a gay lesbian club. Typically, it's a GSA. I believe FHS calls the club Prism. Again, it's questionable as to whether this was really truly student started or teacher started. And then here's the club request proposal. And then, like I said, everything ties into each other, and there's the Trevor Project as their possible fundraising efforts. So also his email to start the club with Principal Drink Wine references the Franklin High School Prism Alliance. So there's their social media, followed by Wilco Iris, that will come back up. And then if parents of private school kids thought they were safe from this ideology, you should probably think again, because there's the Battleground Academy Prism Club. And to look around again, there's not a whole lot on Prism. It seems relatively new, but here's an interesting graphic that we found with the Vanderbilt logo at the top. Basically taking STEM education, putting it through a prism, and out comes woke education and ideology. Teach for America. So Teach for America, our Commissioner of Education, Penny Schwinn, is rather ingrained in. But here's a press release: GLSEN, Teach for America, and the Trevor Project, all entities that we know, partner to create, quote, safe classrooms. Teach for America is 100% in with National Prism Alliances. By the way, Teach for America does a lot of CE training for teachers. And when you look at their resources, again, what pops up? Woke library books, GSA, GLSEN, the Trevor Project, all the usual actors. Which brings us to gender spectrum. And I'm trying to speed up. This is a lot of stuff, I know. This is training and guidance for educators, but then it goes on, medical and mental health providers and other professionals. Gender spectrum is really targeting the entire spectrum of the professional world that interfaces with you and your child. When you look at these latest publications, Principles of Gender Inclusive Puberty and Health Education, and look at all of these organizations that collaborated with them. Transgender students and school bathrooms frequently ask questions. Schools in transition, we've already covered that one. That one made waves back in the day, but unfortunately wouldn't surprise anybody nowadays. But here you've got Planned Parenthood, SECUS, NEA, ACLU, Human Rights, American School Counselor Association, and GLSEN. They're all in bed with each other. It is a self-licking ice cream cone from hell. And here it talks about the adults and children's lives. They want to target teachers, pediatricians, mental health providers, camp counselors, lawyers, and judges, clergy, and coaches. Everybody that could be an influence in your child's life is a target of gender spectrum. The Trevor Project. Now, initially, I glossed over the Trevor Project because their mission is support for, there's a lot of misinformation out there that says, if you don't gender affirm a gender dysphoric child immediately, they are going to commit suicide. And these suicide statistics are flimsy at best. The science backing them up, it's just not there. In fact, if you really look at the numbers, the opposite is true. Transitioned kids are more likely to commit suicide a couple years, 3 to 5 years, I believe, after their transition, to the tune of 19 times more likely. But the Trevor Project here, their whole mission is suicide intervention, which is fine. That's good. We don't want anybody to commit suicide. But when you look around their website, it's not just that. You see here all the standard ideology. When we're born, a doctor assigns us a sex. It's a social construct. They're pushing the ideology same as everything else. Are they really, truly interested in saving youth? Questionable. And of course, they have their take on religion, gender identities, and religion. And I thought this was interesting. Your relationship with religion is completely up to you. And some people, I might say, your relationship with God is completely up to you, but they don't even want to use that word. And also for the Trevor Project being only focused on suicide prevention, it's quite the lobbying arm as well. Which brings us to gender inclusive classrooms. They're pushing. So everybody remembers Dr. Colin Wright, who spoke in Gender 101. Well, he runs Reality's Last Stand, which is a paid for subscription for the research that he does. I highly recommend it. They put out great material. But as part of Reality's Last Stand, they sat in on one of these virtual trainings for Rainbow Club. And his conclusion was the first rule of Rainbow Club is you do not talk about Rainbow Club. And his entire training on elementary school teachers being taught to hide gender and sexuality clubs from parents. Elementary school gender and sexuality clubs. They want to put GSAs into your elementary school and they want to call it a rainbow club. And yes, there's many that already, or a few that already exist. And I have one down here, the French Road Elementary School Rainbow Club. So if you think that Prism Club at Grassland Middle is just going to stop at Grassland Middle, well, you probably thought that 3 years ago with GSAs in the high schools, but they'll never stop. This ideology never stops unless we stop it. So yes, polyamorous club for 6th to 8th graders at Grassland Middle. Give it a couple of years and Grassland Elementary is going to sign up for a rainbow club. And it will happen if nothing is done. And once that toothpaste is out of the tube, it's really hard to put it back in. Just like Alvin Louis said, you have to work with the concrete before it sets. And it is setting here in Williamson County. So I do not envy the fight that the Grassland parents have ahead of them. But they do need to stand up for the kids on this one. And I hope that they do. And I hope that they are able to stop it before it sets. So if they're pushing rainbow clubs, I did a little digging around the rest of their site. It's also a comprehensive site. It has pages upon pages of curriculum guides to introduce gender ideology to your children. Also has suggestions for gender inclusive books, especially for like classroom libraries. As a checklist for gender inclusive schools. So you wonder what things could Williamson County schools check off? Teacher language, are they doing the preferred pronouns? Yes, check. Books, are they doing gender ideological books? Yes. Signage, posters, and images. Yeah, it's all over the schools actually. And there are elementary schools classrooms with pride flags in them. And when a parent asks that their child just be moved, the parent didn't even ask for the flag to be taken down. They just said, move my child to a classroom that doesn't have that. And Williamson County Schools said, no, deal with it. So yes, we absolutely have the signage and posters and images. I've heard rumors of the bathroom procedures, but I don't have any confirmation on that. And curriculum, the social justice, that's absolutely there. It's absolutely in Williamson County Schools via Wit and Wisdom. So if you look at gender inclusive classrooms, all the usual suspects are there. There's your welcoming schools, which is actually the Human Rights Campaign. Teaching tolerance is actually the Southern Poverty Law Center. I think they're trying to make themselves look even bigger than they already are. Teaching outside the binary, that was GLAD, which we already covered, GLSEN. And then I kind of zeroed in on this gender inclusive biology. What's that? Well, it's written by the Trans Educators Network. And this is what it looks like. This is rewriting biology to say that male and female don't actually exist and that gender is a spectrum. It says to support, the mission is to support all students, present and future, we must adapt existing biology teaching to grow a gender inclusive curriculum. That means you're changing the curriculum, you're changing the facts, you're going to teach biology to support a gender spectrum. So it talks about how can we affirm our transgender intersex students when we talk about X and Y chromosomes? How will students with same-sex parents interpret and internalize our lessons about meiosis and sexual reproduction? How do all gender identities and sexual orientations fit into understanding of science development and evolution? Can we create safe spaces in science? I am old school. Science is science, it's facts, and math is math, it's numbers. And there's no safe spaces and there's no ideology. But that is not what's going on here. So down here, trans non-binary educators, we are 3 NGSS biology teachers curating a free centralized biology curriculum resource. There's a lot of parents out there that tell me when their children encounter this ideology, they're like, well, I'm just going to share with them biology, the facts. I'll open a science book. But they're one step ahead of you. They're actually 7 years ahead of you. They've already thought of that. They're rewriting biology. And if you don't believe me, this is one of the presentations that one of those teachers gave in Colorado at a big conference that they had. And it talks about the next generation science standards, the National Association of Biology Teachers, the National Science Teachers Association. And there it is, NSTA on gender equity in science education to promote gender inclusiveness. They're fully woke. Science in the classroom is not going to save your kid. And if they're being indoctrinated in this every day in science, and that teacher who's kind of on a pedestal for most kids, the teachers can say no wrong, do no wrong. If the teacher's been telling them every day that this is biology and you think you're going to go in and backfill that with actual fact, some may be successful, but some will not. They're 7 years ahead. And then here again, since everybody's in bed with each other, there's the National Education Association popping up again in the LGBTQ plus caucus. They're pushing the gender unicorn. I'm not going to go into that too much because it was covered by Dr. Jay Richards and Dr. Colin Wright pretty well. But on their website, they've got all of these videos available for children to watch and for teachers to show your children. And these all look pretty official. So most children are going to, I think, take them at their word. So again, gender inclusive biology, what makes a baby, 8th grade edition. Touch-based sex determination and slipper limpets. So down here, you can see that they're cherry picking instances in the natural world and trying to put that into the gender ideology mold. Pigeonetics game, the guardian frogs of Borneo, chimera butterflies, skeletons, and the diverse reproductive strategies gallery walk. And I want to point out here that last year, when the left tried to meme the parents who had an issue with how seahorses were being presented to first graders, I want to applaud those parents, because if you as a parent are going through your child's books, if they come home, they've actually mostly don't come home, or materials, and something doesn't sit right to you, you have a gut feeling that is your child and you know them unlike anybody else. And God has given you a 6th sense in their raising and their guidance. And if something doesn't smell right, then you're probably onto something. Because when our parents reviewed Seahorse, the shyest fish in the sea, for first graders under the Wit and Wisdom curriculum, they took issue with the fact that it emphasizes again and again that the male seahorse has the babies, and then even goes so far as to show here seahorse sexual positions, which is of questionable nature for kids who have not had that talk yet. Moving on to PFLAG, everybody's probably getting glazed over. So it's the parents, families, and friends of lesbians and gays. On the surface, that sounds fine. They should have a support network for each other. Parents, families, and friends. At least there's families and parents in the title, and I can get behind that. The one thing I do want to point out here is the massive amount of sponsorship that this organization has. And that brings us down to Williamson County organizations here on the bottom in the white. So PFLAG Franklin. Again, we've already covered PFLAG, but when you look at the resource page, here's the tie to Vanderbilt and all the other organizations that we've covered. Franklin Pride. People think that, oh, Williamson County is somehow immune to this. But just as we've seen Murfreesboro have drag shows for children, and Chattanooga and Memphis and the various other places, yeah, it's happened here too. Let's not forget last June, where there's a drag show for children at Harlansdale. And here it's talking about the drag happy hour at the Hyatt House. And here's some images from their social media with the drag queens performing. And then here, Franklin Pride was also quite thrilled about these high school students where the boy dressed up in a prom dress and it made the national news. And they were thrilled. But what does that ultimately do to the kid to have that kind of national exposure, controversial exposure? It's just bulldozing the kid in the end. Here is the Franklin Pride Festival at Harlansdale. And again, yes, there's been drag performances for children in Franklin. Everybody wants to dump that from their memory. But yes, everything that we are dealing with on a national scale is absolutely here. And here's the featured drag performer of Vag. And also, oh, look at all the candy on the table at the recent Pumpkin Fest. Then you look at their sponsors. And of course, Vanderbilt Health is one of them, along with the Williamson County Democratic Party and PFLAG Franklin and a bunch of others. Why do all these businesses support it? Oh, I don't know. We kind of covered that on a global scale. Moving on, there's the Williamson Social Justice Alliance, which normally wouldn't be covered in the gender ideology pipeline, except that they created Wilco Iris. And from what I can tell, they didn't think that the GSAs were getting the job done enough. So Wilco Iris is even another step further in getting into the schools and getting before children. And they're like this with the Social Justice Alliance and Franklin Pride. And here they're advertising a teen lounge plus a drag tutorial taught to you by She Devil. Learn to perfect your makeup and stage presence. More postings from Wilco Iris talking about pronouns, grades 9 through 12, all are welcome. And then I thought this was interesting. Our goal is to have, this is very methodical, is to have at least one LGBTQ plus student representative from every public, private, and homeschool high school in Williamson County. And what are you going to, many benefits, including participating in social justice initiatives. Down here at the bottom of this page, there's a long application to apply to be a Wilco Iris student leader. But it says at this time, we're only accepting applications from Fairview and Page because all other high school positions have been filled. So this is an organization that is systematically, actively installing activists into all the high schools and leadership positions. Does that sound familiar? And here's their social media posts about it. Join the Wilco Iris Student Leadership Council. Student representatives are still needed from the following schools: Page, Summit, Fairview, Nolensville, and Renaissance. So to take us back to the Prism Club at Grassland, the Wilco Iris is 100% connected to this Prism Club, and we have done Freedom of Information Act requests that show it. So here is somebody whose name is entirely blanked out from the Prism Alliance. My name is blank. I am a blank at Franklin High School, and I'm the co-founder and current student leader of our Prism Alliance. I am our administration's representative and a member of leadership for Wilco Iris, our county GSA. I'm reaching out to you due to a social media post. Basically, they're alarmed about Moms for Liberty on Twitter. And then if you read further down, basically, parents attending may prove very detrimental to the point of starting an LGBTQ alliance, as it is supposed to be a safe space for people, and one cannot guarantee the safety of parental beliefs. So just like Alvin Louis was talking about, parents are the criminals, parents are unsafe. And it says, please don't let parents show up to the meeting. That's inclusion. And here's another one from Wilco Iris. Thank you for being willing to lead the GMS Prism Group. We are excited to learn about it from our Wilco Iris student leaders. I help run a safe space for high schoolers across Williamson County schools. So Wilco Iris, there's not a whole lot out there on them, but they're out there and they're working. And here is some of the organizations that they're linked to. Again, all the usual suspects. So we have made it to the end of the gender ideology pipeline. And if you look at this graphic, and it's been added to since I first presented it in Gender 101. Gender 101, it was kind of incomplete. So it's become even more complex since then. And I thought it was pretty complex the first time I presented it. It may want you may want to give up. It may make you feel like you want to give up. But to answer the question, is it here in Williamson County? To sum up all the things that we've looked at, you have Prism Club and Pride Clubs in middle schools. You have Pride flags and 4 classrooms at Bethesda Elementary, and that is probably countywide at all the elementary schools. Gender sexuality alliances are prevalent. I believe they're in every high school. Preferred pronouns are being used by teachers and administrators. Parents that speak out against it, they don't care. There are organized efforts by Wilco Iris in all Williamson County high schools. We absolutely have the woke school counselors. You'd see this flyer here for a school counselor in high school with the pronouns on it. Just up the road, you have the Gender Unicorn mandatory training in MNPS. That was a mandatory training, and it's, again, if we share the Wit and Wisdom curriculum with Metro, what else do we share with Metro? I do not have confirmation, nor do I fully believe that the Gender Unicorn is in Williamson County schools, but I do think it's an eventuality. We just have the Vanderbilt Pediatric Transgender Clinic 30 minutes north as well. We have gender ideological books in classrooms as young as kindergarten, and that's confirmed. There were some parents at the start of this school year that took their kindergartner to orientation, took one look at the books on the kindergarten teacher's bookshelf and withdrew their student because they know what follows. We also have pornographic gender bending books in the library, and that's Lawn Boy, Push by Sapphire, Gender Queer, All Boys Aren't Blue. Those are national books that are making national headlines, but we absolutely have books like that in our libraries. And then family-friendly drag shows occurring across Tennessee. So I said that by the end of this presentation, I would give a rating for Williamson County schools. We give it a 6 to 7. It's not as off the charts as, say, New York or California or Oregon or Washington or Chicago. But if you talk to any of those people from those places, they tell you, they look alarmed and they say, you're only 2, maybe 3 years behind where we are. So while 6 to 7 may not seem severe, social emotional learning was an 8 to 9. It's trending upwards. It's trending towards the red. And that's where, the parents at Grassland Middle have to stand up, and parents across the county have to stand up. If your child is in a classroom with gender ideology paraphernalia hanging around, you as the parent, stand up. Don't permit them to silence you, because you're just creating a pattern of silencing parents, and they're very used to it. So why do we give it a 6 to 7? On the green side, there's no rainbow clubs yet. So thank goodness there's not a GSA for elementary children. We haven't gotten any accounts of transition without parent knowledge or consent. And we do not know of a transgender bathroom policy. But there are pride flags in elementary classrooms. There are concerted efforts by Wilco Iris. There's gender books, not just in K through 5 classrooms, but K through 12, gender books in school libraries. And then on the redder side, GSAs are highly prevalent. The polyamory club at a middle school is of grave concern. We absolutely have activist counselors, as shown by Alvin Louie, and preferred pronouns are in use. And preferred pronouns are the tip of the iceberg. That's how it gets started. So, in doing all of this research, these pictures could possibly be of me. It hurts your brain, it makes you mad, it makes you want to give up and just throw the computer across the room because it feels hopeless. It's like Alvin Louie was saying, a lot of this concrete is set, and it's going to be really hard to break it. But we as a chapter are here to help, because especially in Williamson County, it's not set as hard as California, Oregon, New York, Chicago. So you can still make a difference. You can head some of this stuff off at the pass. How can we help you with that? We can inform you and equip you and empower you to advocate for your children or your grandchildren or children in general. And one of those ways we can do that is through our resource library. Our gender ideology toolkit in the library is mostly complete. And I say mostly because we are going to be continually adding to it. As we come across something, we'll build it. We're continually improving the interface. We're continually curating content to make it a better and better experience. And then the recording of this video is absolutely going to go into that playlist, so for future reference. So, so here's the top of the page. And then underneath it, we've got the recommended reading websites, medical resources, and the page just keeps going and going with detransitioner stories and parent resources if your child's been transitioned and whatnot. So please, it's a great starting point to find even more resources out there. There's a lot of resources, a lot, but there's, to my knowledge, no website that ties them all together to show you how many that there really are. We also have a legal resources page, should you need it. And then also on our resources, I want to point out all these organizations that stand with you, that are doing the research and doing the work and can be turned to and leaned on, or have knowledge there available to you. So you are not alone. It may feel like we're 100%, well, it's not feel, it is. It's David versus Goliath. It's David versus like 10 Goliaths. But they're your kids. So you can't give up on your kids or kids in general. Every kid should be fought for, and every kid should be advocated for, and no kid should be steamrolled or mutilated by an ideology. So if you need to find us, again, there's our website. We're on social media. If you find our work of useful, please consider a donation, because none of this stuff, apart from my time, none of this stuff is free. And thank you so much for joining me tonight. We went about double what I thought we would. It's just a lot of information. Are there any questions? Nope. I beat everyone into submission. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining tonight. Let me stop the recording. All right. And again, thank you.